This video contains full spoilers for all 5 current chapters of Deltarune, as well as all of Mother 3. If for whatever reason you haven't played Mother 3 and are okay with being spoiled anyway, I will try to make everything about Mother 3 make sense, but I have limits. We all love Deltarune, right? That cute, pixelated RPG full of lovable characters, a unique and fun battle system, and its very distinctive sense of humor. Well, forget I said Deltarune because that description was made for Mother 3. Mother 3 is the sequel to Mother 2, also known as Earthbound outside of Japan. The reason I'm using these names is because Mother 3 has infamously never been released worldwide, staying Japan exclusive, officially at least. Unofficially, there is a fan translation making the game available to audiences of different languages, of which Nintendo is aware of and seems to be rather uncaring. One of the players of this fan translation is some Starman.net user called Radiation, but you might know him better as Toby Fox, creator of Undertale and Deltarune. One of the many sentences uttered by this man is when he was talking about Mother 3, he says, "If it comes to the West, you can play it and realize how unoriginal I am." But surely he's just exaggerating, right? Like, there's no way both games have an aura farming rival character for the main party with opposite goals to them, who's always one step ahead, and uses cutscene magic to destroy you, right? Oh. As mentioned in Chapter 5, and implied by previous chapters, there was a tragedy in Hometown involving the Dark Fountains that led to the disappearance of December Holiday, Noelle's sister, as well as Asgore losing his job and being ostracized. Des, as I'm sure you're aware if you're watching this, is heavily theorized to be the identity of the Roaring Knight, who I compared to the Masked Man in the intro of this video. To follow the parallels between Deltarune and Mother 3, the identity of the Masked Man is Klaus, the twin brother of protagonist Lucas. Klaus goes missing at the start of the game, before the time skip separating the start of the game with the main story. He was trying to avenge his mother, after she was killed by a creature modified by the Pig Masks, the villains of Mother 3. He then returns 3 years later with a mask, racing against Lucas to pull the 7 needles to wake the dark dragon sleeping beneath the islands. Pulling a needle passes your heart onto the dragon, so where Lucas's heart is good and would lead the dragon to remake the world in a good way, Klaus/the Masked Man's heart is empty, as he is implied to just be a mechanically reanimated corpse, which would lead to oblivion, with no remade world. Sound familiar? While Des lacks the familial connection to the protagonist, she does have some relationship, as Des, Azriel, Noelle, and Chris used to all hang out together before the incident. But a parallel Klaus and Des do share is going missing because of some kind of invasion. Klaus's disappearance, as I said before, stemmed from the invasion of the Pig Mask army and their modification of the Nowhere Islands' fauna. Des's disappearance stemmed from the Dark Fountains, which are likely somewhat invasive as they aren't known to most of the residents of Hometown and are seemingly connected to Gaster, who's using Hometown as a testing ground for his survey program and doesn't appear to be from the same world or even the same plane of existence that Deltarune takes place in. This makes Gaster and the Darkness a parallel to Porky and the Pig Masks, but I'll be talking about them later. What's important here is how both games have a character who goes missing due to the invasive problem, and another character who shows up years later to challenge the protagonist, who act very similarly. Since this theory is the parallel Mother 3 theory, I'm going to be stating that, at least for the sake of this theory, that Des is the knight. Yeah, I know that seems to be way too much to establish one of the most believed theories in the entire Deltarune fandom, but no theory is any worse for more evidence. Also, having the support of a major theory definitely helps me. But the main reason is to show just how much of a parallel Deltarune shares with Mother 3. Klaus and Des have the exact same story, just in different worlds. Also, if the night is powered by darkness, the same thing that caused Des's disappearance, then that parallels perfectly with how the Masked Man is powered by pig mask technology, the same technology that altered the Mecha Drago that killed Hanawa, leading Klaus to take revenge and go missing. They're both powered by the thing that made them disappear. But while we're here, I want to discuss potential human Des. It is very unlikely, for reasons more than it would mean Toby Fox would make a human character within the gender binary, but as you're probably thinking, Klaus is Lucas's twin brother, so how can he be the parallel to Des when she isn't related to the protagonist? While human Des would answer this, I don't think it's necessary for this theory. It did make me think about it though, and the Mother 3 parallel was what made me think about it in the first place. While yes, she does have a lot of human-looking shoes in her closet, she also has a pair of combat boots specifically fitted for hooves. It's unlikely that they're Noelle's, as combat boots are much more of a Des thing, and also Noelle has a fear of humans under her bed, which would very much not make sense if her sister was one. Also, real quick extra, if the knight's heart is empty like the Masked Man, then why can they make dark fountains which create worlds that reflect the fountain creator's heart? Well, we see how Chris removes their soul, the conduit of our control, whenever they make a fountain. This shows that one can make a dark fountain without a soul. As for why, we'll probably find out at some point in the future. I just wanted to say this, but couldn't find a good place for it. In Chapter 8 of Mother 3, the mastermind behind the pig masks is revealed, after working from the shadows, only giving footsteps for us to follow. It was none other than Porky, the annoying neighbor kid turned disciple of the ultimate evil from the last game, Earthbound. If you're thinking, wait, wasn't his name Pokey? Well, it's a localization difference that was reversed in the Mother 3 fan translation. At the end of Earthbound, Pokey/Porky says he's going to slip away to another reality to formulate his next plan. In Mother 3, he has clearly been to many realities, gathering an army. Porky had gotten bored of playing with realities like they're his personal toy boxes, and, as an immortal, it makes sense. This is shown when he says he's been aging weird due to the time travel that he's been doing during his boss fight. Porky has no empathy for the residents of the Nowhere Islands, only caring about having fun. Porky in Mother 3 is inspired by Sid from the first Toy Story, and how he treats his toys. Porky combines elements of several animals together, or turning them into cyborgs, one of which killed Lucas and Klaus's mother. He also found Klaus's possibly lifeless body, and operated on him to create his perfect soldier, with the power of PK love and the ability to pull needles. This is the story of the Masked Man. Deltarune has a similar force working in the shadows, only revealing themselves by their footsteps. I propose that Porky's Deltarune equivalent is Gaster. In all likelihood, Gaster is probably from Undertale, or at least isn't from the world of Deltarune, and as presented as the overseer of Deltarune. If you are unaware, or haven't watched my previous video on Deltarune, the summary of Gaster's implied role is the arbiter of Deltarune's story. The original name of Deltarune's exe file was survey_program.exe, and the language and music used in the Goner Maker at the start of Chapter 1 imply that Gaster is the one acting as the middle ground between the player and the world of Deltarune, making it into a survey program to run his experiment in. That's a massive simplification of everything, but if you have the time, maybe consider watching the Deltarune Culture Chronicle, that is Device Theory by Molly Stars. But be warned, it is over 10 hours, unless it's a summary of some kind. Anyway, this version of Gaster would make sense as an invading force, bringing the concept of darkness with him. Wait, where have I heard that before? Being someone who uses a world that isn't his own for his own personal gain does give him a very striking role resemblance to Porky. Enough may I say for them to be counterparts. But as all Mother 3 players know, Porky did more than just show up with an army. He introduced the strongest force of evil imaginable, a power that corrupted every resident of Tazmily village without the strong will to fight it. The force of capitalism. While this isn't an actual villainous force that you fight in Mother 3, that capitalism and general childish god-playing by Porky is directly fought. One such instance, the Mecha Drago, is what was responsible for Hanawa's death, and subsequently Klaus's disappearance. In Chapter 5, Asgore talks about Dark Fountains, and how they were involved with the incident that led him to being fired from the police force, as well as Dess's disappearance. Dess and Klaus, as well as Gaster and Porky, being parallels makes darkness the parallel for capitalism. Very poetic. So, while the sealing of the Dark Fountains is parallel to the pulling of the needles, the darkness itself and its invasion into Hometown parallels the invasion of the Pig Masks and their ideals. Following the Porky-Gaster parallel, this suggests that Gaster would be responsible for Dess's transformation into the Knight, similar to how Porky turned Klaus into his robot. It would also seem to suggest that Gaster is in control of Dess, similar to how Porky is in control of Klaus. I know that sounds like a kind of vanilla theory, and many more appealing theories suggest that Dess is fully conscious, but I'm not saying Deltarune is an exact retelling of Mother 3, just that the stories have parallels. If Dess is being manipulated or blackmailed by Gaster in some way, that would serve as a good enough parallel to the Masked Man's manipulation. But if you don't want to settle for good enough, it is never thoroughly explained how the Masked Man ended up in the state he was in. Considering how Porky describes him, and what's implied by some of the cut content of Mother 3, the conclusion I'm sure many people came to is that the Masked Man is nothing more than the robotically reanimated corpse of Klaus. Try saying that 5 times fast. But that doesn't line up with what we see of him during the final battle. The Masked Man is clearly still Klaus, as he recognizes the voice of his mother, Hanawa. Moreover, as the fight progresses, he does less damage to Lucas and shows signs of an internal struggle. I believe Klaus's mind is still there, but unrecognizably hardened by working as a Pig Mask commander, and or being overridden by Porky. This makes Klaus's actions as the Masked Man and in the final battle make more sense. But as I said before, the world would be remade into oblivion if Klaus pulled the last needle. And the Guardians of the Needles, whose names I am not comfortable saying out loud, can sense his empty heart. Well, while he is mostly empty, there has to be some fragment of his heart left for him to return to his senses when he hears Hanawa's voice. The evidence is in the game. I don't think I have to theorize too hard on this one. So is that the case for Dess? Well, possibly. There isn't enough evidence to connect characters like Carol and the Roaring group chat to anyone in Mother 3. There is Facade, a Mother 3 villain with no Deltarune parallel. But we don't know enough to fully connect him with any of them, and Facade's nature as a traitor likely means that his potential parallel hasn't been revealed as a villain yet. Thus, I can't fully parallel predict how the Roaring GC works or who's manipulating who. Or can I? If Porky is Gaster and the Masked Man is the Knight, I am going to go out on a limb and say Carol parallels Facade. From what we see in Chapter 3 and 4, combined with what we see of Asgore in Chapter 5, it's clear that someone is playing both sides here. Chris is working with the Knight, Carol is working with Chris and Asgore is working against the Knight. We already know Chris is playing both sides with the Fun Gang and the Roaring group, but I doubt they'd have the time to play 3 sides, especially when we're in control so much of the time. I doubt they're playing both sides of Carol/Asgore as well as the Knight. We do also see in Chapter 5 how Asgore wasn't aware of Chris's Dark World involvement and keenness to keep them out of it. We also know that Carol is strangely protective of the shelter code in Dess's guitar, and has some awareness of the player soul within Chris, seen when she directly addresses us. Now, Chris, who we know is working with the Knight, and Carol both go out of their way to hide the shelter codes. So, last year's theory ramblings aside, we can safely say that Carol is at least on the same team as the Knight, working in a different area, like how the Masked Man and Facade are on the same team working in different areas. In addition to that, Facade's duty was to pull the wool over the eyes of everyone in Tasmilly Village, the main residential area of Mother 3. As mayor of Hometown, Carol is in charge of the festival, which could be used as a way to distract the people from everything going on with the Dark World situation. While Facade is an important villain in Mother 3, he doesn't do anything huge beyond betraying the Needle Guardians and spreading propaganda. I propose that the darkness in Deltarune is parallel to the capitalism and adjacent corruption of Mother 3. Yes, I know how crazy that sounds. So, what about betrayal? Well, in Mother 3, Facade's real name is Locria, and is one of the 7 Needle Guardians who betrayed the others to work for Porky. If this were to perfectly parallel Deltarune, then Carol betrayed the Hometown Guardians to join Gaster's emo band, but as I said before, Deltarune isn't an exact retelling of Mother 3. What I think is more likely is that Carol is working with Des, aka the Knight, along with Chris, instead of directly with Gaster, but she did likely meet him, as she is aware of the player. She's also pretending that everything is fine and normal as to pull the wool over the eyes of the Hometown residents. She's also hiding a lot from Asgore, as we see how he wants to kill the Knight and parade their body around the town, but is also confiding in Carol regarding his plans. So Carol is betraying everyone in Hometown for the sake of Gaster and the Roaring stuff, although probably for a reason more nuanced than pure personal gain like Facade did, and playing both sides of the Asgore Knight beef. Anyway, this was a lot of talking for a character that probably won't be doing much for the rest of Deltarune, but it's somewhat important, and it is another parallel, so it's worth talking about. I'm gonna be so for real, the Carol Facade section was meant to be a quick detour, but you know, things happen. So, the part we've all been waiting for, where all the dots connect. With all the parallels established, I will now try to piece everything together based on the loose storyline of Mother 3, as well as a lot of headcanon-y filler. The year is a few years prior to Deltarune's events. Asgore is the police chief and is married to Toriel. Chris, Noelle, Azriel, and Des all hang out together frequently. One day, Gaster arrives in that world on his trip across planes after getting shattered across time and space. Probably. I won't lie, there's not a lot to go off compared to Porky's appearance in Earthbound, but back to the plot. Gaster performs an experiment in the shelter, which is logged in entry 17. Dark, darker, and yet darker, photons readings, negative, yada yada. This creates the dark worlds and dark energy. Des goes to investigate the shelter for some reason. even though it's clearly a bad idea. Chris knows about this, but didn't stop her out of cowardice. This is why they're being manipulated to go along with the roaring plot, and made the promise mentioned at the end of chapter 4, and also the thing they had to go to art therapy for. Des was captured by Gaster and operated on, using darkness, to be the perfect fountain opener. Maybe having her soul lost in the code in the process. In the time between this incident and chapter 1, Asgore sees everything going on, eventually tells people what he saw, including all the dark fountain stuff, but nobody believes him, and labels him as incompetent and crazy. He then gets fired from being police chief, and he and Toriel get divorced. Carol starts looking for Des, eventually coming into contact with the Knight. She starts trying to get pieces of information from Asgore, even the things nobody else believed. Carol concludes that Knight is Des, and meets with Gaster in the shelter, where she is given a deal that Des will be returned to normal after his plan, which would be safer and faster if Carol takes part in it. Reluctantly, Carol agrees with tied hands, and Gaster shows her his plan involving the player's soul, the survey program, and Dark Worlds. This is why Carol is so welcoming to the player, as she knows that the sooner the player finishes the survey, the sooner Des comes back. Gaster may or may not be telling the truth. Time goes by, and Chris and Noelle drift apart, due to Chris's guilt at feeling responsible for the Des incident. Eventually, the time comes for the survey program to start. The Knight makes a fountain in the spare classroom, and the player's soul is transferred into Chris. Cue chapter 1, and all the subsequent chapters up to 5. It's likely that Chris checks back with Gaster in the shelter, like at the end of chapter 3 before the survey program cuts and rolls to the credits. Now for everything after chapter 5, some of this will be based on my points and predictions from my last video, but there is more detail here. This also has less points I can make parallels to, so it will be more Deltarune centric. Chapter 6 will start with Noelle joining the fun gang, involve somebody getting kidnapped and taken to the shelter, Azrael possibly being introduced, and have the huge climax of the prophecy's tragedy being broken. This will cause the seams of the world to split, with darkness pouring out of them, covering the whole world in darkness, with a bunch of titans wreaking havoc, kinda like what happens if you disrupt a canon event, but with titans. Chapter 7 will take place in this messy, warped, roaring dark world, outside of the prophecy, and lining up with the weird route having Chris and Noelle exit the bounds of the game. Gaster and his pack of image friends will be defeated, and there will be a final confrontation between Chris and the Knight, where control of Chris may be taken away from the player due to Gaster's defeat. This fight will have Des be repeatedly reminded of who she is, but she doesn't listen and keeps fighting. But then there will be a turning point, perhaps Azrael suddenly appearing and taking a super strong attack for Chris, and Des starts to relent. Knowing that she's not in full control, she destroys herself, so that she won't continue doing harm. This causes Chris to become inconsolable, as they worked so hard for so long to bring her back, and the soul can't be used to hold off the roaring anymore with its light. Hope is lost for everyone, except for our goat, Susie, who, with the pages all around her being covered in dark ink, uses her white pen of hope to make a light fountain, creating a new world with its story written in white ink. This world will be beyond the scope of the survey program, so we don't see what happens, but there will probably be some closure, similar to the end screen of Mother 3 and Sans' phone call from Undertale. Since the world is living on outside of our reach, this isn't a definitive ending, which lines up with how Deltarune only has one ending, which I'm reserving for the weird route, which I'm also not going to talk about here because it isn't nearly as similar to Mother 3. Us being locked out of the new world is the angel being banished, having met with our desire to finish the game. Yes, I am assuming that the angel is the player. I don't have any better ideas, and hey, it works for this theory. I know that some of my Mother 3 summarizing wasn't amazing, so I would recommend watching a plot summary video as I already kinda spoiled everything. Or you could do the better option and play the game yourself. But if you do want to watch a summary, my favorite is The Beauty of Mother 3 by Chargy. It's pretty long, but it's a very good watch. I'm assuming, like, everyone watching this is a Deltarune fan, not necessarily a Mother 3 fan, but either way, it can help with understanding Deltarune's DNA, or re-experiencing such an amazing story. So that certainly was a theory. As far as Toby really being unoriginal, I'd say it's more along the lines of inspiration. But it's still fun to base predictions and theories about Deltarune on Mother 3, as they do undeniably share a lot of DNA. I had a lot of fun making this theory, as Mother 3 is my favorite game of all time, and Deltarune easily makes my top 5. Deltarune is also the only episodic release thing I'm into, and I'm loving theory crafting and speculating based on intentionally placed lore threads. Mother 3 is also quite lore heavy, but it was released all in one go, and it's the last in a series. This makes any more ambiguous plot points solely to be questions to stick in the player's mind, and really drill in the impact of the game. Deltarune is not like that, as, you know, it has an episodic release, so the questions it leaves are resolved later. But maybe that won't be the case for everything, like how everything goes on after we get banished. But yeah, I loved fitting characters into parallels of each other, and I'm even more happy that I could craft a whole theory out of it. It's a real pleasure to talk about my favorite game while also making a theory. And hey, if you liked it, why not prove it and leave a like, maybe even subscribe while you're at it. I don't really know when the next video will be, because this one really took the steam out of me, so don't bet your inheritance on next Smorgasbord Sunday. But you never know, as surprisingly, this is meant to be a group channel. But I have been responsible for all the videos so far, bar the Warframe compilation. So, if any of the others actually start pulling their weight and making their own videos, there can perhaps be videos in my absence. Anyway, drama rant over. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single one of you. Feel free to comment what you think of my theory, anything you agree or disagree with, and I'll see you next time. Bye!